I am calling the June 12th, 2024 Toledo Planning Commission to order. And right now we will have a roll call starting on the left.
I'm Lundgren here. Jonathan Mix.
Cora Warfield, Ann Ellis here, noting the absence of Mr. Sutherland, and we'll wait and see if Ruth Ann and Ricky show up. So, are there any visitors?
I have one online, James Sylvia. James, if you want to speak, you can raise your hand.
Silva, is that what it says? Well, welcome, James. Say something if you'd like to. Okay. Does it look like he wants to? I can't quite see.
Yeah, it does.
He's figuring his mute out.
Thanks. So.
They gave me an unmute. Oh, I got kicked out maybe?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just don't know what I'm doing.
We can hear you now.
Yeah, hold on.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think we're waiting for him. Flash twice if you want to talk. We lost
I
him.
think we lost him.
Well, hopefully he'll find us again.
Yeah, it's a city.
City council. Okay, that's what the name sounded familiar. Thank you. Okay. Well, until Mr. Silva joins us again, hopefully, we will review the minutes and decide if there's any corrections, and if not, then we can approve them. You see, Brian can't because he wasn't here.
I can move approval.
That'll work. Okay.
A second.
Okay, do we have a second? I'll second that. Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes from May 8th, 2024? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, they stand approved. Okay, well, I think I'm handing this over to Justin then.
Thank you. So that today we're kind of continuing through our partition subdivision kind of kickoff, and we'll continue this at future meetings as well. So kind of the first section today that we're going to look at is actually a brand new section within the general provisions that's being proposed. So the public on page 1, public infrastructure design standards there at the bottom. So this, something that our code currently doesn't do very well is outline the process. And again, we haven't had many subdivisions or plan unit developments over the last 20 years. We've had a lot of partitions, but what our code doesn't do a very good job is outlining kind of how to go through the engineering and design standards for, like, say, a new street that's going in with a subdivision. So the goal here with this section on the first and second page is kind of to outline the city approval process for when that new street is being laid out. So that first section, so again, it shall conform to the requirements of the development code, the improvement standards and specifications adopted by the city, and shall be installed following these procedures. So the city approval required, improvement work shall not commence until the plans are approved by the city. All plans shall be prepared in accordance with city requirements. So this is, you have that approval from planning commission for a new subdivision, say it's a 30-unit subdivision. You've received your preliminary plat approval from the planning commission, but then when you're going out there to actually lay out the street, this kind of allows the city to have that review process and make sure everything's meeting city standards and also any conditions that might have been within the planning commission's approval. This isn't laid out very well in our current or really at all, our current partition subdivision code. It's a little bit, we have our public works design manual, which talks about design standards, but I think this makes it really clear in terms of process that will be followed. They, as that new developer will have to notify the city, and then there will be inspections to make sure it's meeting all the city standards. So that'd be the public works director or public works staff that's going out there to ensure those standards are met. And then also the installation of all underground utilities. So that's sewer, storm drains. Basically, we want to make sure as a city that as we're accepting a new street, that everything's designed to our standards and is going to last a long time. Because we're kind of how it works is the developer builds it to city standards and then the city accepts it. And now it's the city's responsibility in terms of ongoing maintenance of the street, unless there are cases of private streets, but most will be dedicated city streets that the city will have to maintain and throughout the life of that street. So that's essentially what any questions on that section?
Yeah, the one that I had is on B, and if work has been discontinued for any reason, but I'm wondering if is that discontinued for a week or discontinued for a month? I mean, should there be some sort of clarification or not?
I think it's just, we would want to know.
It's just notification.
Yeah, so like if they started and then they stopped work for.
Or something other than the weather. So
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if, they're gone for the weekend, I don't think that's.
No, I was just, I was wondering if, because sometimes things don't come in and people they're hung up for a week because they can't go on because the supplier isn't there. So, okay.
Yeah,
I was
and
wondering.
that's a good question. I think it is more if a part hasn't come in or they break down their paving equipment.
Vacation for a month.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
we're just curious.
the goal there is the open communication with the public. works
Notification back and
department.
forth.
Yeah,
Okay.
Dig a hole in the middle of the street and then go, oh, I gotta go on vacation.
yeah.
I'll let you know when I get back.
And also, I mean, there's the unfortunate case of like, if a developer pulls out or something and just leaves something
Yeah.
half built, so it's,
Run out of money or something.
yeah.
I've seen that.
Our last planned unit development was Beaver Street off of East Slope in 2007, 2008 was when that was approved, and that was right recession time, so they never developed any of that. They had built up they got most of the street improvements done. They had to end up doing a little bit recently, but they started actually building those houses. I think it was in 21 where they had built the first one. They had it platted, had the utilities, stormwater, all that was laid in the ground, but it was just kind of waiting and sitting there for 12 years. But that's kind of our last planned unit development that we had. And on the next section, we talk about the planned development procedure. So planned developments are very similar to subdivisions, but it allows for a deviation from the subdivision standards. Most often what you see is a deviation in the lot size. So planned developments will come in with smaller lot sizes instead of the standard for the RS being 6,000 square feet. A developer wants more lots, so they'll build them at all 5,000 square feet. So that you're basically any numerical standard you're deviating from typically. So lot size, sometimes it'll be that they want smaller front yard setbacks potentially, but most often, I think it's the lot size that you see. There's also, I'll get into it a little bit more, but other things that can be deviated from in planned unit developments. The Beaver Street example that I provided, I can't remember the exact size of those lots, but those lots were pretty small. They were under the normal standard for our subdivisions. So you'll see often then those houses, I think, are roughly like 900 square feet up there. So that's most often what you see. One thing that's added here, I don't think there is a reason to change much in terms of the purpose statement, but in terms of overall objectives. So here to encourage land development that to the greatest extent possible preserves natural vegetation, geologic conditions, and refrains from adversely affecting flooding, soil drainage, and natural conditions. So also what you can do with plan unit developments is if they're smaller lots, you can kind of cluster them on a portion of the lot and then protect, say you want to avoid the steep slopes on the lot, or if there's a known like drainage canal or creek or whatever it happens to be, you can cluster on one side of the lot and you can still meet your density standards and then preserve that space that really isn't developable or would be expensive. So that's another way that plan developments are used. And that I think that purpose statement kind of brings out a little bit more of or the objectives bring out a little more detail. So that's why that was added. And then the zoning, we added zoning and phasing. So one thing that wasn't provided in the current plan unit developments is the phasing element. So subdivisions, last time we updated those sequences of phasing. But one option now with this new language, the applicant may provide for a development in phases. And then it references that subdivision standard, the 16-1207D is the phasing for subdivisions. So you could come in with the 3 phases potentially. Typically, you wouldn't see that for like the Beaver Street was an 8-unit one, so there's no need for phasing. But if it was a larger, say 30-unit, it might make sense that they want to do 15 and then 15 later on. So it kind of gives that flexibility for developers need for plan unit development. And one plan unit developments don't necessarily have to be residential. You can also have commercial plan unit developments as well. You might I don't know how likely it is in Toledo, but like a strip type mall or something like that could be plan unit development, or even like an industrial like flex space maybe is another option that you could use a plan unit development for lots. So it's not exclusively residential, but it's more typically seen on residential development. And I think one of the more important sections is the 16-080 allowable variations from the title requirements. So the following variations to the requirements of the particular zone may be allowed in conjunction with a planned development. And this is added language in order to create developments that are superior to those that could be developed through conventional development and design standards. So by adding that flexibility, the goal is that you get development that is in a sense better than what you might get from subdivision standard subdivision standards. And kind of one avenue that could be updated is the density standards. The current increase amount that you could do is an increase of 10% of the standard density. This proposal would change that from 10 to 20%. So in theory, if you're allowed a density of 10 units in an acre, you could bump that up to 12 with the planned unit development standards. One thing here, the reason that some of these portions are actually deleted is the one thing that's become big, which we did a little bit in our residential code, but from the state level, is it's called clear and objective standards. So within housing, they're trying to make the standards clear and objective, so they can't be subjective in terms of like aesthetics of a neighborhood. So that this in that same section there with the 20%, it talks about you can increase it if the planning commission finds that an increase will not adversely affect the development itself or the surrounding neighborhood. So that sentence itself is subjective. But we can have other things like traffic, so a traffic impact analysis. That's an objective standard in terms of if an engineer comes in and looks at, does an analysis if the road capacity would be increased to a point where you needed to make additional improvements potentially, or it was over capacity. So that would be kind of an objective criteria.
What if I was, after that, I saw that was good, the traffic and stormwater, but then that open space for aesthetic appearance. Now, is that, I mean, light and air are not should be compromised, I think, not I don't know, I think.
No, that's.
But is that's somewhat subjective?
No, I
What do you
agree.
think? Does anybody else think? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You're saying change the word
Just take,
comprise to,
no, take out, I'm saying for aesthetic appearance of light and air. Just take that adequate sewer and water is available and that the purpose of the zone is carried out. In other words, take out that middle phrase. That
well, just take it all.
open space and the aesthetics of light and air are not compromised, because
Oh, that's a good catch.
I mean, that's my thought.
Yeah, I think that
You
sounds
think
good,
so? Okay.
because yes, I think that statement is a little subjective.
Yeah, yeah,
That would tell me right now that they don't want any trees there.
yeah,
Well, because that would compromise
yeah,
Right.
light.
yeah. And air, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. I just think of,
Yeah.
one light and I want air.
Yeah.
It needs to be blue light and the air needs to be scented.
Yeah.
Not Wilson.
Yeah.
Wood smooth.
Yeah.
So, I got a question.
Yeah,
So what you're saying here, instead of having it 10%, you'd change it to 20%,
Yeah,
and that would be on approval, so automatically it's 10%, and then they can ask for 20% or?
no, they could, it's up to 20%, so someone could come in and ask for only 10% if they wanted to. So that's yeah, so up to that, the 20% would be the maximum density increase that someone could do. But right now, the maximum is only the 10%. But someone still could come in and only say they were limited based on the density standard to 10 currently. Right now, they can only do 11. But then with this, they could do 11 or 12 potentially.
Does that contradict the 6,000 square foot rule?
It would be, yeah, you could go basically with the planned development, you could go underneath the 6,000 square foot. So it, I don't know if I wouldn't say contradict, but it allows flexibility to go underneath it. And that's kind of the intent of
I
the,
thought that was a standard on the other page, was 6,000.
yeah,
They're about 6,000, 5,000.
yeah, so the 6,000 square feet is this current standard for the RS zone.
Yeah.
So if you did a partition or subdivision, it's 6,000 square feet. With RG zone, I think it's 5,500 square feet now, so you can
Okay.
go a little bit denser, but the planned, if you went the planned development route, you could take your 6,000 and potentially go down to like 5,000 if you wanted to
Okay.
through this route.
And then, and it's thinking planned development, also there might be such things as duplexes and perhaps fourplexes and such in a planned development to get that density. Possibly.
Yeah, there could be, and right now with our last housing code update, we updated it. That any lot that we allow a single family, we also allow a duplex. We haven't, the development demand there hasn't been super high. We've seen a couple duplexes, but not a lot. But the goal of that is you have duplexes probably scattered around Toledo, and it's not in totality won't have a huge impact if they're all kind of spread. But there would be an option potentially to have duplexes within a planned development as well. Or there could be even like if someone did a planned development where they had 10. I don't know if there's a lot big enough, but if you did 10 single families and then you left a larger one that was like a 6-unit apartment or something, you could go that route. And that would still, that density is based on the unit, so you could still meet that density standard or make sure that you're under the maximum density as well. And then very similar to what we just deleted in that last section. For building height may be increased up to 10% beyond the standard of the zone. Upon approval of the planning commission, so it talks about the open space. To provide aesthetic appearance, so that is proposed to be deleted, but focusing more on the fire lanes, water pumps, additional hydrants. Or other conditions, so really focused on safety. One thing that we maybe could add is talking about buffer setbacks, because I know with fire, I think typically I'd say more, and Jonathan jump into more applicable for like out in a forested area that you have your buffer zones that you create around your structure, but that
You
also,
could say that any landscaping would include a buffer zone, something like that,
yeah, we could say buffer
fire buffer.
areas, fire lanes, water pumps.
I mean, like, the main thing would be like, okay, so if this house catches on fire and they have bushes and stuff in between the next house and that house, those bushes catch on fire and they catch the next house. Most of the time, the fire department, there's enough people, they can protect it or wherever, but some cases that they, they're stretched thin or whatever. So. I don't know,
Might be worth just having buffer areas inserted in there.
cause like, say like my house, my lot's 50 feet wide. Our house is like 26 feet wide. So we have 5 feet on one side and 15 or whatever on the other. But so it's like, the two houses are pretty close together.
Yeah,
But there's 10 feet apart. What do you put there to buffer the fire from one house to the other, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Just. open
yeah,
space.
that's a good point, because it's almost. The setbacks in a way kind of should in theory give you at least 10 feet. We have non-conforming ones where you have maybe a historic house that's a foot off the property lines.
Yeah.
You aren't actually 10 feet between the structures, for new development,
Yeah.
it should in theory be at least 10 between.
Right.
So other kind of things like that could be reduced, we had mentioned lot size, but like street frontage, setbacks, in a zone. I mean, to clarify on the setbacks, though, there's also, you can only go so far with setbacks because there's also building code requirements between buildings as well, but you might say someone wanted to go 4 feet instead of the 5 feet. That would be something that could potentially be varied through planned development, is that side yard setback or front. Someone wanted to do front yard setbacks. That also could be an option. People have also done front yard setbacks, and then you actually have a separate parking lot area that meets the parking lot standards, so you don't have driveways in front. So that's our parking standards do allow for that option. It's not as common, but that's something that maybe could be in theory done, that you have that frontage where you don't have enough for a driveway, but you have a separate area that's dedicated towards shared parking. And that would be defined within the planned development would have their own kind of rules in terms of defining that. But you would still have parking, 2 spaces per unit would be required. So I mean, essentially it gives a lot of that flexibility for a developer to be more creative than they traditionally could be with a subdivision. And so that's the idea with the plan development standards.
Some, like having standards, like 5 feet or 20 feet in the front or whatever. That's nice when it's nice and flat,
Mhm.
but when you're on a hill, you gotta change, you gotta be flexible.
Yeah. That's a good point. And that's the hope is, with that flexibility, you could create those smaller lots to avoid or decrease setbacks. Because I mean, we have standards if you impact slopes greater than 25%, but you have to bring in a geotech engineer. And oftentimes you really don't want to impact some of those slopes.
I was just thinking of that one over by Old Sturtevant, I think they logged it, but they haven't moved very far forward. But, that's on a ridge basically, so I'm thinking of that, you can lay it out, but like a city street or whatever, a grid pattern, but you have fluctuations because of ridges and,
Yeah.
there could be a spring here or something, they gotta shift it a little bit, one way or the other.
Mhm. Yeah, and that one is one that might be one that could come before planning commission. We haven't heard recently from the owner of that one, but they were thinking about dividing it.
Right.
Originally,
That's the one by the elementary school,
Yeah,
right there.
that would,
I
and
just noticed that logged here a while back.
yeah, it's been long for a little while.
Yeah, I don't go that, it's very helpful.
in that one planning commission members approved that annexation a couple of years ago.
How
Now,
much, do you know how much land you're talking about there?
I think it's a little over 6 acres that got annexed.
Oh,
So,
so whatever you're being in the city, then you can get quite a few homes up in there.
mhm.
Yeah, depending on. That's good.
That's one that's been out there as a potential, and then the other one is the Arcadia annexation. That one I would say is a little further off, just because there's more challenges around the water sewer, getting it up there.
Well, and that was a mixture too, right? That was residential and commercial, I think.
Yeah, they were,
Mixed use, wasn't it? Or multi-use, I think, right? They were gonna do some single family.
yeah, it's for sale now, so it would be a different, I don't think it's sold, but it'd be a different developer, but I think what they threw out there was some multifamily mixed with single family, because it is zoned residential.
All on the left side, nothing on the right side, as you go out
West,
towards,
yeah.
towards.
Yeah, the west side, yeah.
The west side.
So we
I was
just,
just thinking, yeah.
so we just annexed that, but we didn't, it's not divided or anything yet, right? We just annexed it.
Yeah, just 'cause it was annexed, that's it, which was kind of the first step that had to happen. The second step is, yeah, water sewer would need to get engineered and extended, whereas the other lot, Sturdivant, water was there, but sewer is close, whereas the Arcadia one, it's both are have some distance. I don't know the exact feet.
How far does the water go there on Arcadia? Cause there's where that property is, there's still some vacant property.
I think it goes up as far as the cemetery.
Does
And then-
that-
and
Yeah, I think it was
then-
that
Does that not go
Yeah,
all the way
a little south of the cemetery, I think, yeah.
I think it was Skyline intersection.
Yeah, that's where it is, yeah. Yeah.
So it's. Yeah, and there were other potential options where you even, and this is where you would need an engineer to come in and figure out what's the best option. But there are some talked about like coming along the ODOT, not in ODOT right away, but along that way and then pumping up. But we haven't seen any like plans for that development. So I would say that one, order of operations will probably be after the Sturdivant one in terms of scene.
Back burner.
Yeah. It's it was about 15 acres on each side of Arcadia there, so it's a good amount of land up there. But it's just, there was, water sewer challenges. It does have some slopes in there, so it's not a perfectly flat, easy lot, unfortunately. For the one thing I wanted to add, which I didn't have in the packet, but kind of looking back at this. Under the criteria for preliminary evaluation, I want to add a 10 and 11. So one thing that's pretty common is a traffic impact analysis. So I want to add 10 that says traffic impact analysis where required by the Public Works Director. So if it's a smaller 8 units, probably not, but if it was a big plan unit development, we would want them to submit a traffic impact analysis with their proposal to show how they were impacting the existing system. So that would be under as number 10 there. And number 11, something that I want to make more clear is often they're called stub-in streets, but it's basically ensuring that there's a future connection left. So if I own 10 acres, but right next to me, there's another 10 acres that another property owns, but making sure that street network can be continued. So number 11 is stub-in streets where the potential exists for additional residential development on an adjacent property. So if it's already an existing network, you're not gonna have to provide that. But if it looks like that there's another city lot adjacent that it could be continued to, then that's where we would require basically it's in the future addition. You'll see it a lot where it's blocked off.
Where the streets are gonna go, the traffic impact, or just how it would connect to a future.
Yeah, they're two for the connection, it would just be how it would connect in
Okay.
the future.
Yeah, a lot of times they have the sidewalks in the intersection, right? The curb and everything and the streets there, and then they have it all blocked off.
And that's exactly right. It's a similar standard that the cities require that because they expect future development there, because you don't want to block that off for future development. You want to make sure that street networks
Could be
continue.
the Shell Silverstein clause.
Yeah, it's trying to get good, we're trying to get good development essentially, and it's a balance between not requiring too much because we want development and also making sure we have good future development, so trying to balance balance the two, which can be
Don't
hard.
get overburdened with it. but-
Yeah. And then the next, there's not, so one interesting section that exists in all codes are these expedited
Yeah.
land divisions. And I mean, Arlene said since she's been here, it's never been used and that it was a clause in all code sections that typically hasn't been used very often, but there are updates. The updates that are shown in section E are basically ensuring that we're matching the new state ORS, so ORS 197 was slightly updated, so we're removing the section E will now read, will result in development that either creates enough lots or parcels to allow building residential units at 80% or more of the maximum net density permitted by the zoning, or will be sold or rented to households with incomes below 120% of median family income, and that reads.
That threw me off, 120%. I did, I don't know how to. What does that mean, Cora? Tell me, what does that mean? 120%.
About 120% of your median family.
Yeah,
So
median.
low income.
Well. And I wouldn't like
Yes,
often there's different. Ways you can define median income, but 100% would be like your standard,
right.
but then. Living, like I'd say low income is often defined as like 60% or less median family income.
Yeah.
So 80 to 120% is more probably around the working class. But this, again, it's a little confusing, this section.
It makes sense to everyone else.
It's directly from the ORS. We've never used these expedited land divisions. One thing I am looking into a little more detail, which we'll probably bring back at the next meeting, is they're called missing middle subdivisions, and that those how they were written, they fall under the expedited land divisions. So basically it's trying to get development happening faster for missing middle is often considered duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes. So basically not single family and not large apartment complexes. It's a term that's been created to define a type of development that's often not found within cities. I'm looking into, because with some new legislative updates, that section might apply to Toledo too, but I want to verify that, and that would fall under the expedited land divisions, and that's where we might see this occur. There is, and it's hard for me to envision some of the how these work because we've never had to process them. So it, Arlene, you can jump
Yeah,
into
I'm
if
just
you have
thinking
any.
we had one, I don't want to drag this out, but you know, for a duplex or a triplex. And yeah, they're saying, you know, we need it, we need housing in Toledo, we need housing. And then and they meet all the criteria, but then you find out that they're gonna rent it for the market value. You know, they're gonna go ahead and rent for as much as they can get, and that's kind of disappointing.
Mhm.
Then there's nothing we can do about it. And so that's why I was wondering this 120, you know, in other words, this looks like if it is expedited and they fall under that, then they will have to make it, you know, whatever, and then that changes from year to year.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's,
I mean, it used to be that you planned a third of your monthly income would go towards rent. And I know now it's closer to 50 or 60% is what some people are paying for their rent. It's a lot. So that's my little.
No, and that's true, even with even with the missing middle. The new missing middle also expedites, and it originally was for cities 25,000 plus, but there's new legislation where I think it applies to
For lower.
as well. And the goal there too is what would happen sometimes is you would have a subdivision approved and then it would get appealed. But the missing middle standards, how they're set up for those larger cities already, is that actually there's a faster appeal process. Because sometimes what would happen is someone doesn't want any sort of development near them and they would appeal appeal it at planning commission, appeal it at city council, and then they appeal it and it goes to the land use board of appeals. And it sits there for 6 months, gets kicked back to the planning commission to correct. And then it kind of it's set and housing isn't getting developed.
Yeah.
So part of the missing middle, I'm not an expert in it yet, but I've started looking into it, is that you can speed up that appeal process. That basically the requirements are like, you need to get through this within X number of days. And so that development can start to happen. So you don't get stuck in these appeal processes. And then ultimately that could bankrupt or just make a developer not want to continue. Yeah.
Never seen that before.
Never.
So that's the goal. It doesn't, it's not.
Games attorneys
Yeah.
play.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike, what are you doing?
But it's true.
It's true. That's, our hope is to actually, we'll talk about it more, but have a July recess and come back in August and have probably a lot more. So be ready in August for a lot more, hopefully, to take a look at. And we'll also be looking at some additional residential standards. We've done a lot with the residential, but there's just some other minor tweaks that we might make at the same time. We've also ran into, there was a survey around childcare and how they sent a survey out, the Department of Conservation and Development, trying to figure out how cities permit different types of childcare, so like home-based versus a commercial childcare. And what we found by looking at that is some of our definitions within our code are actually out of date. So those should get updated as well. And then also trying to look at kind of how we make our, at least on the land use side, make our code more conducive towards childcare businesses, especially because they're a lot closed. Saw a lot closed during COVID, but how can we open up that to make it easier for people? I mean, there's still building code and other compliance sections, but for on the land use side, what we can do and updates there. So we're kind of with the partition subdivision stuff ongoing, but also trying to clean up some other sections of the code as well. So if you're in the code and you see where someone talks to you about a section, let us know and we can look into it to see kind of what could be updated.
I was speaking with someone and they were saying that we were talking about landlords and, keeping stuff up and everything. They said that they passed a new, I don't know if it was state or county or whatever, that if you're a landlord, you have to have a contractor's license to work on your own place. Is that correct? That just seems so bizarre.
That's always been. If it's a commercial building, you're supposed to, it's.
But not
years.
for residential.
But not for residential. My own house, I can do my own.
Right, but if you
electrical, if
rented
I
a
have the
house to
skills.
somebody else.
But if I'm renting it to somebody else, yes.
You have to have a contractor's license
Yeah.
to go in there and change the toilet?
Or layers.
Or, yeah, you need to, if it's
When-
commercial, I think you need to hire think you need to hire a somebody
Somebody
with
that's
a contractor's license.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, if you live at the house and you do your own wiring, your house burns down, you live there, that's your problem, but if you do your wiring or whatever at some, and you're renting the house out and it burns down and somebody dies, then
Yeah, if you're renting it out, I think it's kind of like
well, yeah, I was
it's
just
kind
thinking,
of like the
there's certain
downtown
things that,
stores, right?
yeah,
All them, they're all commercial space. You have to have in theory, should be a contractor, a licensed contractor that's doing the work.
And then the same thing kind of applies in like apartments. Like an apartment complex might have a maintenance person, but they're only allowed to do so much.
right. No, I can see for certain things like electrical and such like that, but I mean, there's other things that people can do and that I was just wondering what the parameters were. It just seems like that would make it, gives the landlords a reason not to repair.
A lot of landlords, I think, will opt to let you do some stuff yourself. Depending on what it is, like if it's replacing doorknobs,
Yeah,
no, I don't think if it's something that
yeah,
it's probably more serious, like the plumbing and electrical that they want contractors doing.
or like a remodel.
yeah.
It is a kind of a consumer protection.
No, I was,
Idea.
I was just wanting to clarification because I was
Years
just
ago,
curious.
I've had contractors that I represented get fined by the CCB for, their license lapse. They had been licensed and for painting. $5,000 fine
Because they didn't.
because
do the rim right.
because they were CCB and their license lapsed and they didn't realize it.
Yeah.
And they were caught by the contractors board painting walls.
Yeah,
Oregon takes their licensing pretty seriously.
Yeah, I think it all comes
Okay.
back to that consumer protection thing.
And they ask on the building permit form, like if you live in a house, then you can check that you're doing your own work and then they can cross-reference it. But then if you're not, then you put in your CCP license on.
yeah, because if you did it and then just had somebody come in and inspect it and they could say, oh, you gotta, anyways, I was just curious. I was
Yeah,
surprised.
No, and there was a situation where I called the CCB in 2008. I bought a house to flip and it was partially owned by an LLC and an employee of the LLC could work on the residential house
Yeah,
because without a CCB license. And for some reason, that was not prohibited.
okay, thank you. We're just.
Yeah,
It just, yeah, I just found it interesting when you hear, there's always two sides to a story and three, so, yeah, the landlord side and the renter's side, so,
And
yeah.
the CCB is pretty. Brian's right. Jonathan nodded his head too. They're pretty
Yeah,
swing the hammer. In my opinion, or at least they were once.
There's licensed inspectors that drive around and that's all they do.
I see that you're doing work at the site yet.
Oh, sorry. Okay. 196. 360.
yeah.
Or 197. So, yeah, I guess. Kind of upcoming, as long as no last minute public hearing gets scheduled in terms of an application. We'll probably have a recess in July. Related to that, one thing that came up at the last meeting was the doll site visit. So we've been trying to schedule a site visit for that. Some of the potential dates are the 10th, which would be technically the day of the planning commission meeting, but we would only do the site visit. Other date is July 31st or August 14th. our ideas that have been thrown out there. So we haven't got a confirmation from Dahl, but likely that would be like after working hours, like 5:30 or 6, go out to the site, visit it. And then we'd have to notice for a potential quorum at the location. And then after that, we would disperse. But we are trying to get something scheduled.
How about if only 3 of us went, then we'd be.
Yeah, you'd be okay, but you just notice for potential quorum. It's like
Yeah.
if city councilors did a walking tour or something, you just have to notice for potential quorum, or even if there's like a public event that multiple like planning commission members or city councilors or go to, you just notice for potential. So that we're working on that. Hopefully it's the 10th, just because we're gonna have that day free already without a meeting. But we'll keep everyone updated on that. Grant, oh, I guess, sorry, I skipped this. Upcoming election of officers. So we're at that point again. So kind of something to be thinking about for the August meeting is we're gonna have to do new election of officers. So Anne, I know you've expressed interest of not continuing, so if you want to continue, you can continue, or if not, someone else is going to have to step up.
Yeah, we're negotiating.
Something you can think about it for the next 2 months.
Wait till she's had a better month.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, just so we don't surprise you at the next meeting.
So my understanding is that I don't have my calendar. The 10th is the next Wednesday. And so instead of having a meeting, we'd go look at the doll place. Is that what I?
Yeah, if we can get it on the 10th, we also had the 31st and then August 14th proposed as that.
14th, the day of the meeting.
The 14th is the day of the meeting.
That might be a lot to do that and then and go over everything.
Mhm,
Yeah,
yeah. So,
yeah. And then the folks that are still working, that might not, to go ahead of, yeah, whatever. But I think the 14th, I think the 14th might be a little crowded.
yeah, and we're hoping that they respond for the 10th, but we're just waiting on a response. Arlene had sent that email, but we're just waiting. But we'll bug them. We have a month, so.
Yeah. There's always winter too.
Yeah. But we're trying to get it on the calendar because I know it got discussed.
Yeah. Wait till you can walk.
You would, you can drive up there and,
Oh,
yeah, so you can drive up to the flat part, so you'd have to walk around it
yeah, I was on 20, I go, oh my, how do we get up there?
on the back. I've been up there once, but you can go up and there's park, so you don't have to walk up the whole thing. Grant updates. So we have a current Safe Routes to School grant for the signs. So there'll be the 20-mile-per-hour signs when flashing, and then they'll have a speed feedback on there too.
Those are the ones along Sturtevant.
Yeah, on each side of the elementary
Mhm.
school, so they basically replace the existing school signs out there. Those should be installed by end of July at the latest. We have, Public Works has the signs. They're doing some of the concrete work, and then they're just finalizing, that's technically county jurisdiction there, so they're finalizing the permit with the county to get those installed. So that's moving. They ended up being slightly cheaper than we expected, so it needs to still be reviewed by council, I believe, but we submitted for crosswalk signs at 10th Street there to East Slope Park. There's a crosswalk. And there's currently pedestrian signs there, but these would be ones where you press it and it flashes. Those were submitted as an amendment to that budget, so it'd be two signs. We're gonna have to do some ADA work on the ramp on the north side, because there is no ramp right now, but was added to that existing grant. That's the good news. We did apply for phase, so how they set it up for Safe Routes to School grants is you submit a part one and they kind of score you to see where you are compared to other cities. We did that for the sidewalks again, and we were, I think, at like 30. We were in the 30s, like high 30s, and the cutoff is right around the 25. So we're at a point where it was probably not worth our time to submit a part two, just because we were outside of the scoring. You can make up some ground potentially in part two, but not that much. So we'll probably, something we might revisit to see. The part one really doesn't take a ton of time to put together, but at least you can see if it's a good year to score. They did reduce, one good thing is they reduced the match amount. It was for certain criteria for cities, and I think Toledo would have met it so that there would be less match or potential no match, which is a huge benefit for smaller cities. So I think it's something we'll re-explore, but it just didn't make sense to take the time this time around. And yeah, I'm glad we were able to do add the crosswalk signs. Those probably, whereas those other signs are being installed this year, those we haven't ordered or anything, so it might be next. Depending on how fast we are, it could be fall or next like spring that we're installing those signs. The other Oregon Parks and Rec, we submitted I think I mentioned this, but I just, so I say it again, but we submitted for a parks plan. So hopefully in the next couple of months, we'll find out if we receive that, and that's something planning commission members would be involved in terms of probably surveys, outreach, talking about the parks plan drafts. So that's potentially, we're hopeful that we receive that grant. That's everything I had. I don't know if Arlene, if you had anything else, or Mike.
I'd add there at the end that the parks master plan is then referenced when you apply for other grants in the future.
We did a
It's
parks
just-
inventory at one time, I think, long time.
Yeah, I think some of was done.
Long, yeah,
That's been quite a while ago we did that.
yeah.
Because we visited
Yeah,
all
we
the
did,
parks.
yeah, we
and
visited the parks and we did,
What
yeah,
possible upgrades or fixes that
Yeah.
they needed.
yeah. The one on Nye Street, they did a really nice, that they had a whole bunch of bamboo or something.
Right, it was the
It's
bamboo.
gone.
Is that all?
It's gone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Already,
They
Where
worked
they
on
cut
it.
that tree down out there at the Twin Views on Laurel.
Sounds good. It's not a rush.
Remember
because we have the board room.
That's a good.
No,
thing.
that's where-
There was this tree that had kind of almost fallen over that was there. And I know they got rid of the tree.
Yeah.
That was good.
Okay, I guess we've, the staff has commented and, we were just commenting on some. Does anybody else have a comment they'd like to make? They just want to go home. I don't blame them. Okay, I adjourn this, and everybody have a safe 4th of July.